February 16, 2023, China blacklisted Lockheed Martin and Raytheon for selling weapons to Taiwan. It was a sanction. But it was also an echo of 1931, when Japan's military defied its own government, seized territory, and walked out of the League of Nations. That choice ended in invasion across an entire continent. I'm David, and here's how that echo repeats. When China named Lockheed Martin and Raytheon Missiles and Defense on its unreliable entities list in February 2023, the announcement landed as punishment for one thing: selling weapons to Taiwan. But look deeper at how sanctions actually work. They don't make a rival country surrender. They make it desperate. They convince military planners that compliance is expensive and defiance is cheaper. That calculation, repeated at scale, closes the door between compromise and conflict until only one choice remains, and it's never the reasonable one. This isn't new logic. 92 years earlier, Japan faced almost the exact same choice. The West had choked off its oil, its scrap iron, its cotton, every resource the country needed to keep its economy alive. Japan's military leadership looked at isolation and saw one path forward: seize what you can't buy. Take territory with resources. Conquer before they strangle you. That choice, desperation dressed up as strategy, led directly to the invasion of Manchuria in 1931. And Manchuria, it turned out, was only the first domino. The question now is whether Beijing's blacklist follows the same path: one sanction, then another, then a military that stops listening to politicians, then the choice to take what commerce won't give. Japan before 1931 was locked in a cage it built itself. The country needed oil to power its navy, scrap iron for warships and tanks, cotton for uniforms. Every bit of it came from abroad: America, the Dutch East Indies, Australia. Japan had no backup, no domestic sources, no allies who could fill the gap. This wasn't just a trade problem, it was hardwired into how the whole country worked. Shut down the oil and the navy stopped. Cut scrap iron and factories went quiet. Choke cotton and there are no uniforms. Japan's military had done the math. The country had, at best, 2 years of stockpiled reserves if the West cut off trade completely. So when Japanese military planners looked at international isolation, at the West tightening sanctions, cutting trade, they didn't see a punishment they could survive and negotiate through. They saw a countdown with no off switch. The only question wasn't whether to act. It was what and how fast. And that answer came from a single decision point: a false flag bombing that junior military officers staged in the dead of night to force their government's hand. September 18, 1931, 10:02 p.m., Mukden, Manchuria. Colonel Seishiro Itagaki and Lieutenant Colonel Kanji Ishiwara had spent 4 months planning this exact moment, every detail worked out. In May, they'd sent their invasion blueprint to Tokyo. Tokyo said no. So they built it anyway, in secret, in direct defiance of their own government. On the night of the operation, one problem: a superior officer, Major General Yoshitsugu Tatekawa, was arriving to stop them. Itagaki met him at the station and took him to a tea house, kept him occupied, entertained him long enough. At 10:20 p.m., while Tatekawa was still sipping tea, a small explosive charge detonated beneath the South Manchuria railway tracks. The blast only damaged 1.5 meters of rail. It didn't need to be bigger. Itagaki's troops were already in position. They blamed the explosion on Chinese saboteurs, rolled out in force, and took the entire region in days. Tokyo woke up to find the Kwantung Army had invaded without permission. The civilian cabinet ordered them to stop. The army kept going. General Honjo, the field commander, was first shocked his own officers had acted without his approval. Then Ishiwara convinced him the invasion was already unstoppable. Honjo blessed it after the fact. That night, something fundamental broke. Japan's military had just shown its civilian government who actually made decisions. Watch the orange line collapse in slow motion. A false flag bombing breaks civilian control. Tokyo orders a stop. The army refuses. Then assassins kill the prime minister who tried to restrain them. With no politician strong enough to challenge military power, the Kodoha faction, ultra-nationalists who believed Japan's destiny lay in conquest, seized control completely. Expansion stopped being a dangerous option and became state policy. By 1933, the League of Nations had one card left: moral authority. An independent commission had investigated Manchuria, found Japan guilty, and said the League should refuse to recognize Japan's puppet state. 44 nations voted. 42 of them said yes. Japan is the aggressor. We stand by the findings. Yosuke Matsuoka, Japan's chief delegate, stepped up to respond. He didn't apologize or backpedal. He told the assembly that Japan could not accept a verdict it regarded as an insult to national honor. Then he said the words that closed the door: "We are not coming back." He led the delegation out on February 24, 1933. Japan formally withdrew on March 27. In 4 months, the military had destroyed civilian control at home and walked out of the one global institution with any power to impose consequences. What Japan's military discovered that year was this: sanctions are only as strong as the victim's willingness to comply. Once you decide compliance is more expensive than defiance, international opinion stops mattering. You're at war with the world, and you're ready to take what it won't give you. After Manchuria, one thing became clear to the military: partial conquest only creates more isolation. You've taken territory, yes, but the resources you seized aren't quite enough. Your economy is still dependent on Western imports you can no longer get, so you need more. More territory, more resources, more buffer zones, more conquest. On July 7, 1937, Japanese and Chinese troops clashed at the Marco Polo Bridge near Beijing. The clash may have been accidental or deliberate. Historians still debate it. But the Japanese military didn't see an accident. They saw an opportunity. Tanks rolled across the border. Soldiers advanced into Chinese territory. Within months, major cities fell. The invasion followed the exact logic that had driven Mukden. Japan's military believed it had no choice. Sanctions had strangled trade. Isolation was choking the economy. The only way out was conquest: seize land, seize resources, become self-sufficient through force of arms. It's the same calculation Beijing's military planners are running today as they watch American tech firms cut off their supply chains. The specifics are different: semiconductors instead of oil, intellectual property instead of scrap iron. But the core math is identical. Compliance looks more expensive than defiance. That's the trap China set with its blacklist. And that's the trap China is now caught in. What happened between 1931 and 1939 taught one brutal lesson: economic sanctions don't deter empires ready to fight. They convince empires that surrender is more expensive than war. Japan didn't invade because it was inherently aggressive. It invaded because isolation felt like death, and conquest felt like the only escape. The West applied sanctions expecting Japan to negotiate and back down. Instead, they convinced Japan's military that the West would never trade fairly, that isolation was inevitable, and that seizure was the only rational choice. Now Beijing faces the same crossroads. The US has cut China off from the most advanced semiconductors, banned the chip design tools China needs, restricted military technology transfers. China responded with its blacklist, not trying to win back trade, but signaling it will not return to a position of dependence. The specific resources are different. Semiconductors are not oil. Intellectual property is not scrap iron. But the trap is identical. Each sanction makes retreat look weaker. Each counter-sanction makes compromise harder. Hardliners gain influence at home. Moderates lose authority. Military planners begin calculating whether a limited confrontation costs less than indefinite isolation. The question isn't whether Beijing will invade tomorrow. It's whether we're watching the same slow-motion choice that trapped Japan, not a decision, but a series of moves that gradually make reconciliation impossible, until only confrontation remains. Sanctions don't contain empires convinced. War is cheaper than compliance. They accelerate the logic that makes war inevitable. That logic is running now in Beijing. I'm David. Hit subscribe to see where trends like this lead. See you tomorrow.